Out of all of the episodes of Frasier, I think Dinner at Eight is one of the most important and one of the most moving and meaningful. And for them to address something so powerful 3 episodes in is a bit hit and miss, or it could have been, because it's quite serious. And I think it's something a lot of people would relate to. It could frustrate a lot of people, but it works so beautifully well and is so important for the character development throughout the rest of this season. Bearing in mind I've seen all of Frasier, I am now doubling back and rewatching for the purposes of discussing them. So in hindsight, I feel like this is a really important episode, not just for this season, but for the entire show. This is the 3rd episode of season 1, which was released in September of 1993, directed by the amazing James Burrows, who I think is absolutely fantastic. And obviously we have the usual fantastic cast: Kelsey Grammer, Jane Leeves, David Hyde Pierce, Perry Gilpin, and John Mahoney. Patti LuPone does the radio phone-in for this one. A very interesting phone call. We also have Moose, who plays Eddie, of course. Eddie doesn't have that much of a role in this one. His greatest laugh comes from something Martin says to him, rather than something Eddie does. So unfortunately, it's not Eddie's best episode. But in terms of the Crane Boys, it really is. The majority of this, there really is only one main narrative here. Usually, there'll be a plot and then a subplot, but this one really just focuses on Niles and Frasier trying initially to get their father to go out to a nice restaurant with them, to make him dress a bit fancier, basically trying to improve, in air quotes, their father. And as we have established even so early on into the show, Martin Crane is, on the outside, very different to his sons. And it turns out that they can't go to this fancy restaurant, so Martin manages to persuade them to go to a very rustic steakhouse with him. And I won't say what unfolds after that, but as you can imagine, very smart, well-dressed Niles and Frasier Crane in somewhere that feels very casual and very relaxed. Let's put it that way. I'll be as polite as possible about it. They don't fit in, and suddenly they're starting to sound very snobbish, very stuck up, very above themselves, too big for their boots, forgetting their roots. And it's all about how, just because you are more educated than the average person, or because you have more refined or acquired tastes, it doesn't mean you're better than other people, and you shouldn't look down on other people, which is what they started to do. And that's such a wonderful lesson. And in a way, that would have been a great lesson for the very final episode of Frasier. Although, to be fair, this lesson is taught, obviously not effectively if it keeps getting taught, but this is something that comes up time and time again throughout Frasier. And it's not usually as hard-hitting as this. Usually it's the odd reference or the odd little kind of poke in the ribs to say, oh, you're being a snob. But right here, they're told straight, this is not acceptable. And it's a bit of a wake-up call and a bit of a reality check for them. And it is quite a serious subject, because I think, snobbery and being all high and mighty and looking down on people who have less than you or know less than you is something that happens a lot. And I think it's quite serious and something that could affect a lot of people. A lot of people who maybe don't have as much money or aren't as well educated may feel like a lesser person. I mean, for goodness sake, I live in Hampstead, quite a posh area of London, and I certainly don't have as much money as a lot of the people around me. And you kind of feel that sometimes. Sometimes you don't. So I think it's a really important message, but don't think that there are no laughs. For me, fluffing your knickers is one of my favourite lines all of Frasier. Oh my goodness. Honestly, like, the first time I heard this, I swear I was about to wet myself. I have never laughed so hard as when Daphne first said, fluffing your knickers. I've heard that line many times because I actually watched that clip quite a lot. It's in one of my favourite videos to revisit when I'm feeling a bit low or whatever. One of my favourite lines out of every single episode of Frasier. It is a funny episode, but it's also very, very serious in some ways. I think it's absolutely beautiful. It's wonderfully written, very well directed, beautifully acted, of course. I think John Mahoney gave an absolutely incredible performance. His performance was the strongest out of everybody here because Martin was the real driving force behind the passion he felt for, I guess, other people like him, if you like. And the message in this, it all came from him. It didn't get much of Daphne, unfortunately, and only a tiny bit of Roz. But ultimately, I absolutely adore it, and I do think Dinner at Eight may be one of my favourite of all of the Frasier episodes. Fluffing your knickers?